Cy Hersh joins us for 30 minutes coming up, then Leanne McAdoo. And boy, do I have a lot to go over with him. I want to talk about Iraqi commander claims that U.S. secretly evacuating ISIS leaders to safety. I want to get into Congressman Paul appalled by NSA spying on Congress and where all that is going. I mean, so much to talk about with Cy Hersh, but the big thing is his new book, Military to Military. And that deals with the fact that our military has been trying as best they can under orders not to stop the radical jihadist. And, of course, the State Department wants to keep up the show that they're actually not with them. So that allows that purview, even though it's a fake mission, the military has actually tried to carry out the mission. So we're going to talk to the expert on this. And, of course, I've got all my sources as well. What's amazing is just so much of what he's put out in the excerpt of his new book, Military to Military, backs up everything that our guests have basically talked about here on air. So Cy Hersh coming up on the other side of this break. Remember, Matt Drudge was here. They are pushing to control the internet. They're now admitting that in the news. That's coming up after Cy Hersh leaves us. There is a big push to restrict free speech, a big push to take over more and more of the freedoms on the internet. Chinese-style systems. So you got to decide which side you're on right now. Are you on the side of basic human liberty and freedom and a safe society? Because that's what's safe is freedom. Or you want tyranny? Because if you go along with this, that's where it's headed. I mean, we already see a lot of tyranny, but it's only getting worse by the millisecond, obviously. Very, very exciting that folks are tuned out of the whole left-right false debate of divide and conquer and are just getting back to freedom versus tyranny and making a choice. I could interview this individual for 5 hours. I mean, we've only got him for like 25 minutes, and I'm so excited. I mean, there are a lot of guests we've had that get me excited, but I'm about as excited about this as I've ever been about any guest. So maybe Donald Trump coming on, a Ron Paul, a Matt Drudge. I mean, it's right up there with that. Seymour Hersh, I remember growing up, at the end of the Vietnam War and hearing my mom, talk about how great Cy Hersh was and my dad and them reading his articles in major publications. And then, of course, since I've been out of high school 25 years or so, I'm 42, I've been following his work continually. And I know most of the audience knows who he is, but I've talked to folks who don't know who Chuck Yeager is. I mean, it's just... It's crazy how ignorant some of the public are. Not our general audience, but the new people tuning in every millisecond on close to 200 affiliates across the United States. He's won the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Award. He basically helped expose the biggest massacres in Vietnam and helped pretty much cause a chain reaction that ended that war. You can't give him full credit for it, but I could say he gets the most credit of one man. Or, maybe the guy with the Pentagon Papers who's been on as well. But then, and I know he doesn't want to be talked about, but I'm going to do this for a minute or two, then we're going to him. Just so you know how big his new book is and how important it is. He exposed the Iraq War as the fraud like no other. He exposed the NSA. He has just exposed it all. He exposed what he called one big lie, not one word of it true, the Osama bin Laden raid. And he has been demonized, attacked, you name it. But the truth stands on its own. That's a badge of courage. And so we've had former NSA technical director William Binney on, so many big people. I don't know if you call Cy Hersh a whistleblower, but he's beyond that. He's probably, undoubtedly, the greatest living investigative journalist, and he joins us now on his maiden voyage, hopefully one of many. I know we've talked in email a few times over the years, and my writers have, but he joins us now. Mr. Hersh, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, but you better tell people we're not related after that introduction. You're not my brother-in-law, are you?
You know it's true. Come on.
You know something? It's the day before New Year's Eve. It's choir here in my office. I'm sitting here like a mouse. I don't feel so important today.
Well, it's amazing, sir. Obviously, we're here to talk about the latest info, your book, Military to Military, the incredible stuff happening in Syria, really showing the soul of America, both good, bad, and ugly. But first off, in the continuum of your 40-plus years of reporting, sir, looking at all this, is America getting more corrupt or less, or do we just know more now, or are elites getting more brazen? I mean, tying your latest reportage into the things you've seen, what is the state of the world through your rose-colored darkly?
Well, you know, it's interesting you ask that question. I would say right now that the guys who control the press, the ability to manipulate the press, is much greater than ever. And even the very good newspapers are you know, staggering under the idea that it's just really hard to take everything at face value. The current press secretary for the President of the United States may be a perfectly nice guy, but he never worked as a journalist. He was always in the public relations business. I'm not suggesting he's criminal or wrong, but we don't even have a journalist there. So, yes, I would say things are worse off generally, just in terms of day-to-day credibility. It's just so much easier for the guys on top to get away with, if not a falsehood, just an incomplete answer or a non-answer when one should be issued. I think it's much worse. I just, you know, now if you go to the White House or to the Pentagon for comment, it's sort of pro forma. You're just doing it. And there's a line there, the Pentagon today denied or refused to comment. You just don't get help on stories that are adverse to the government anymore.
Cy Hersh is our guest. I mean, I think one of the quintessential moments was a few years ago when Gibbs had left as White House press secretary, and he went on MSNBC and said, yeah, you know, we knew the drone program was been public for years, but we were told to go out there and say it didn't exist. This is like the Wizard of Oz. And then the pundits all laughed about it. It's almost like it's funny now that they've put us into a false reality. They just hide it in plain view.
Well, you remember the president, the current president, joked that if you know, his daughters are getting to be of dating age. I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with humor, but you have to sort of. It was at one of these annual meetings where the national, the press club give the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which I think is sort of a scandal. The press all fight to see which guy can be at their table, which person from the government, and it's sort of like kumbaya. But the president actually said that guys better watch. When they're dating his daughters, a very attractive woman, young woman, he said they better watch out because he can always schedule a Jones strike. I thought that was, wow. I mean, are you kidding me? You know, that's over the line, it seems to me.
It's not professional. I mean, it's like Hillary saying we came, we saw he died in Libya and laughing, and then having her Brian Williams moment claiming that she was attacked in Bosnia on the tarmac.
Well,
none of it's true.
You got me on the. I'll tell you, you're singing my song about Libya. I just can't believe we didn't learn from that. Which is, you know. And by the way, just to clear up the record, the article, the military to military, it's just an article. It's a long article I wrote. It's I'm doing a book, but not about that. I'm doing a book about Cheney. But I did write that article for the London Review of Books, which is a great magazine. And you know, it turns out because of what you guys do, the internet is so lively. It doesn't really matter where you publish anymore. 30 years ago, if you weren't at the New York Times, you felt like you were sort of, you know, or the Washington Post. But now, you know, it's just out there. Things get out there automatically. So that's good. We have better communication. It's just too bad we don't have better information.
Sure, so that's bringing some balance back. But there is a glut, and I'm aware of your big book on Cheney that's coming out. Can't wait to see what your eye comes up with him to really find out what this guy who works on the dark side is really all about. But let's specifically get into Syria, because I've had generals on, colonels on, lieutenant colonels on. I've had CIA whistleblowers like Tosh Plumlee on, but you've got obviously a lot better contacts than I. You've been, I know, given security clearances before, unless I'm wrong. Looking at all this, walking us through it, sir, and your incredible article, Military to Military, explain to us, as best you can tell, what has really happened in Syria. Well,
the big issue is the question. One of the big questions is, we've demonized Bashar Assad. He's a dictator, no question. You cross him, he'll cross you. He's a lot better than his father, the old man Assad, you know, Hafiz Assad. He was trained to be, he was the second or third son, never thought he'd be president because the older boys had the pass. Went to medical school, was an ophthalmologist, married a very second-generation Iraqi woman who worked for one of the national, you know, investment houses. American investment houses in London. And so he was not, all of a sudden there he's called upon. His older brother dies, and his father says, you better get a couple of years of army training and get ready. So look, he's hated in America. I don't think you can get 5 votes for him in Congress. He's demonized, has killed There's about 250,000 deaths.
But he's a lot better than Al-Qaeda.
Well, you know something, and ISIS, and also things have. I watched him for 6, 8, 10 years. I went back and forth there. I've been going there to the Middle East a lot since 9/11, and he's he got much more open. You could you could bank there. You could have the you can go to an ATM machine. There were 30 different foreign broadcasts on TV. He was opening. Yes, when you cross him, he's going to fight you to the end. It's a war to the end. He's fighting ISIS. He's fighting Al-Qaeda. He's fighting al-Nusra. These are people that hang and Garat. Some of the horrible stuff that happened. He's had as many as 200 of his soldiers executed at one sitting by these people. So it's a war in which he's killed a lot and they've killed a lot. And it's a war to the end. And he's what I wrote about in part was that our Joint Chiefs decided some years ago on the basis of intelligence reporting that there really wasn't any option, that there really were no moderates. Although the White House keeps on talking about there are moderate groups in the opposition. There were at one time, but they were quickly taken over and cleaned out by the more radical jihadists, people who believe in Sharia law. Some of the groups we advocate as moderate have already made it clear that if they ever took over the government, no Christians or Alawites, that's a minority sect, Shia sect that Bashar Assad and about 12% of the people living in Syria belong to. None of them could be allowed to live in the country. They were talking about genocidal, genocidal cleaning, cleansing, if you will, of a society. Those are the moderate groups. So there you are. So the option was the Joint Chiefs looking at the intelligence, looking at the fact that we had been supporting for years covertly. This is through the CIA, David Petraeus. I would argue that Hillary Clinton surely should have been aware of this. She was Secretary of State. We began to, after Libya fell, we began to funnel stuff that in an earlier article I called the rat line. A lot of arms from Libya into Turkey, and from Turkey, the gentleman running Turkey, Erdogan, is a total, complete supporter of ISIS. I don't think there's any question of that, even though we deny that. Our intelligence shows it. So what I wrote about is the fact that 2.5 years ago, the Joint Chiefs decided, well, they can't convince the White House and the State Department with intelligence. They're just going to begin to do what they can do to try and modify the American policy or make it less, nobody wants to talk about directly challenging a president. That's not your job. But I will tell you, at the certain level, at the Joint Chiefs, the level of 4-star generals, the oath of office is an oath to the Constitution, not to the president.
That's right.
And it's very traditional. You can go back to Douglas MacArthur. You can go back to World War II fighting. You can go back to terrible fighting in Vietnam.
President Eisenhower, as the president, challenged the military-industrial complex as a system himself, the ultimate level, still a general saying, I want to challenge the people that want to control our military for their own aims.
There you go. There you go. And you can even argue that the hatred for McNamara, by the time he was ready to get out of there in 1967 because he refused to listen to the generals. We've always had generals in opposition, so this isn't new. What they did, though, instead of directly challenging the Joint Chiefs, as I wrote about, beginning in the summer of 2013, after a lot of intelligence showed that our path was wrong. We weren't going to win. If we got rid of Bashar, we were going to have a government completely full of wackos, wingnuts. A hard line, take off their head people.
Clearly worse. I mean, a whole new Afghanistan.
Well, there you go. Well, look, Afghanistan's still a mess right now. People always talk. I'm a big supporter. I was in the Army. There's nothing better than America. It's the greatest country to be in. But we do have a lot of freedoms. And I will tell you that our special operation forces, the Delta Force, the SEALs, they're terrific. They're very good at what they do. But they're being miscast. We're now in 14.5 years of a war against an idea, and the Joint Special Operations Command, for all of their ability to go hit a house at night and kill people and take them out, we're not winning that war. We've got to figure out some way to do it differently.
Yes, sir. Well, Cy Hersh joins us. I want to go back to the bombshell you just dropped that's in your article, Military to Military, London Review of Books, and expand on this with you. Because what you write here and the generals you talk to, and you've got the former head of Defense Intelligence, Flynn, and others going public on Al Jazeera saying, look, we were ordered to aid Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all this. This is bombshell, and it verifies stuff you were writing about years ago that you were demonized over. This is unprecedented in my lifetime to see generals on TV saying we don't want to back al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, ISIS. We don't know why we're being ordered to do this. We don't know what the mission is. I mean, if your mission is to kill Christians, then it works. If it's not, you know, what's the point? So you've got the high-level sources. I just don't think the public realizes how seismic this is and what it symbolizes under the surface. So can you speak to more of that, please, sir, and go over to you what this means in your 40-plus years of being inside this?
Well, we're just fighting this war wrong. We're fighting it wrong. We are supplying a great deal of material to people that we claim to be moderate, and there's no question the first thing that happens when a small group that maybe isn't as far out as ISIS or al-Nusra, but the first thing they do is they have no choice either to sell it to them or get it taken away. So whatever we're sending there...
They get bullied by the most extreme. Yes, sir. But I mean, when I'm getting back with you, sir, and I know you hold your cards close to your vest, you just got into the Pentagon, the Army mainly, from my sources, you're confirming it, saying, we're not going to back al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, ISIS. We're just going to give intel to the Russians and intel to Assad and stop that. That is just a huge American moment that makes me so proud of the armed services. That is great.
Well, you know, it's interesting. What they did was, because they didn't want to go directly to Bashar Assad, because the president had ruled that, you know, that would have been direct violation. But we did know that the Germans in particular, the German intelligence service and the German high command, and get this, the Russians and the Israelis, all three had been in contact with Bashar Assad, because all three, even Israel, which sometimes, you know, doesn't always speak what the real policy is, they've got a lot of problems, government problems, leadership problems. But the guys running the military and intelligence system in Israel had the same point of view as the guys running at least that were running our Joint Chiefs, because the general at the time was General Dempsey.
They're sane.
Martin Dempsey, who's now retired. There's a new chairman. And we don't know where he stands on this, because publicly he said little. He's only a couple of months into it. I understand a very competent Marine named Dumford. I just don't know much about him. I know more about Dempsey. And
was Dempsey the big hero in this, going to Obama saying...
Well, you know, he wouldn't look at it that way. He just did something. The issue was we were going the wrong way. The Germans and the Russians and the Israelis were begging for intelligence. One thing America does, and we do it very well. We have terrific intelligence. We have satellite. We have SIGINT intelligence. We do have people on the ground. Believe me, we can do better. We can do better than anybody wants to write about with certain groups. We can penetrate people. We're not incompetent, but often it's the leadership that gets you in trouble. So they decided that the Germans in particular were kept on saying, what can you do to help us? They began in the fall of 2013. We began to shovel stuff that we had about al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, ISIS. We began to shovel information not only about where they were, but what they were thinking, as much as we learned. And so we enabled Bashar's army, the Syrian army, which right now has probably emerged, and it's been fighting a tough war for 4 years. It's emerged as one of the better armies in that area. A hell of a lot better armies, for example, in the Iraqi army or anything we have in Afghanistan. So what they did is they did it that way. And that way they were sort of, as somebody in the article I wrote said, you know, we're doing stuff military to military. The president may not have known, but there's a lot of stuff he doesn't know about. So that's the way they got around the issue. And they began to help it and help Bashar. Not only that, it was very much a morale builder for the Syrian army to know that they were getting very high-level intelligence. So I don't know how history is going to judge this. As you can gather, stories like this in the mainstream press don't get copied. But it doesn't matter, because there's the internet. You know, there's guys like you and all sorts of other people around the world that pay more attention than often the major papers here. You know, I worked for the New York Times for 8 or 9 years during Watergate, and I won a lot of prizes in Vietnam, and certainly the Nixon years a lot. And one of the things, you know, is there's not many reporters at a good newspaper who have the kind, you know, there's nothing special. I have friends that I know. Most of the good guys at the major papers have somebody. And when you're at that level where you've got access and you're covering the Pentagon or the State Department or the White House, the last thing you want to do, I know this sounds almost silly. The last thing you want to do is chase somebody else's stories. You just don't want to do it. So when somebody as me bops along and writes a story that says something, the only thing the editor can do is ask one of the good reporters to do it. And what they want to do is figure out some way to get this out, turf this, get this off their desk. So it doesn't really happen. It doesn't happen with the papers. And I understand it because I'm sure I did the same thing. We're all, we all love what we do, and we're more interested ourselves than anybody else. That's one of the things about my business that's sort of wacky.
Well, here's the bottom line. You've had the courage and the fortitude to go through a lot. I know you don't talk about this, but, I mean, I know the stuff I've gone through. I mean, I can imagine, and I've seen some of it in the news, you've gone through a lot of harassment, persecution, to tell the truth. And it just to see the media today just being repeaters. They take a corporate press release as pitchmen and just put it back out. It's very, very sad. I just hope that you'll join us to talk about your Cheney book. Very, very...
yeah, but that's, the problem I have with that is, that, here's Cheney, who's a very tough dude, who decided one day after 9/11 that the rules don't apply, which is, and the thing that always interested me so much about Cheney, and I'm not telegraphing that much, is how easy it was for him to do it. How he could change all the rules.
He's a sociopath.
How easy it is. It's just, it turns out our Constitution, which we all dearly think is so wonderful, it's pretty flimsy. It can be beaten to death very easy. And that happened. And so here we are. We have a prison in Guantanamo that to the Arab world is a symbol of everything that's wrong with America. It's so dumb. It's a prison guys can go into and they disappear for... There's a lot of bad guys there, but there's an awful lot of good guys, too. Guys that had nothing to do with anything. We were
Sure.
paying $5,000 to $25,000.
We lose the moral high ground. Sir, I've got to get you back up. But the time I have left, I've got to ask you separately, dealing with all the things that are happening and the way terrorism is being used to take our freedoms, bringing all these refugees in. We know a lot of them are foreign fighters. They're going to attack. Then they say, oh, we'll just put up naked body scanners on the highway. I mean, isn't the war on terror a fraud? Because all the funding in 15 years, and we're still seeing terror attacks. Shouldn't we just preserve the Bill of Rights and Constitution and not be intimidated by terror?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with everything you're saying. Let me make it clear, because I have a different view on immigration. I think you can do things, rational things, to separate the good from the bad, although I admit there's always a risk with everything. But certainly, I'll tell you, we've walked away from a lot of bases. And you're right. One of the basic things we use, it makes it easy for the government. And look, I know people that are very serious inside the government about the security risk and are scared. But the bottom line is it's being used to pass laws that violate the Bill of Rights. And that's... I
agree. Let's not blame the migrants and the poor war-torn folks. I know. I'm just saying they're going to use this, the few bad guys that come in to take our freedoms. When is the Cheney book coming out?
Well, hey, come on. I'm a journalist. We never make deadlines. Well, I don't want to make any predictions.
Mr. Hersh, we're out of time. I know you got to go, but I just want to let me say bye to you during the break. But I tell you, thank you so much for your courage, and you deserve it. You're an amazing person. Thank you so much, sir. A model.
Well, thank you for having me, and have a happy New Year.
You too, sir. Thank you.